All
This
right,
is
good.
good.
Well, I'm ready to go. Thanks. Thanks
Perfect.
for your
Perfect.
patience.
No, absolutely.
Anyway, I've been interested in this for the last couple of years. In fact, I've been interested in this since the year 2004, and I'll explain to you why. But the first opportunity I had to share with my colleagues about the importance of diet and climate change was when I was given the fourth Lifestyle Achievement Award by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And at this presentation, I had a chance to talk. Well, they only gave me 9 minutes to talk, but I ended up talking for 22 minutes. And they seemed to appreciate it. But I'm happy to have a chance to share a similar presentation with all of you folks. The truth is simple, easy to understand, but we're always looking for complex solutions. That happens to be the way that the human being deals with things. We're looking for Star Wars solutions, when really low tech is what solves the problems that we have these days. For example, COVID-19, we have vaccinations, which have been, they've had their pluses and minuses. We have treatments for these viruses, which again, fall short of being ideal. What we have to rely upon is public health measures, simple things we've been doing for thousands of years. And I'm going to add to that a simple thing to do when it comes to COVID-19. I'm going to add to that a starch-based diet. When it comes to the treatment of chronic diseases, we have heart surgery, we have all kinds of drugs and devices and so on. But the simple solution to chronic illnesses is diet, exercise, and a little sunshine. And when it comes to climate change, we're looking for all kinds of Star Wars answers like carbon capture. I mean, they really ought to put that one out of business. And makes about as much sense as aliens from outer space coming down and saving us. Whereas we have ways to deal with the climate, to save our home, to save our planet. And we're paying some attention to these, but not attention to the one that will really make a huge difference. In fact, the only card that we have left to play, which is a healthy diet. I want to begin by talking to you about the effect of diet on all three of these conditions and the fact that diet is the common denominator for chronic illnesses, which I've spent the last 45 years treating, climate change, and infectious diseases. Now, let's begin with diet. I've spent the last 45 years taking care of people with dietary problems. And the way I've tried to focus this so it's simple for people to understand is that the reason folks are sick is because they're suffering from food poisoning. The reason people are sick from smoking cigarettes is they are suffering from tobacco poisoning. And when people drink, what they're suffering from is alcohol poisoning. And you know what to do for your patients. You get them to stop the poisons, right? Well, when it comes to diet, people also suffer from food poisoning, and I've tried to put it into a couple simple categories. The food poisons are animal foods and also free oils. We're talking about things like olive oil and canola oil and flaxseed oil, et cetera. Free oils, in other words, oils that are separated from their original food, and also animal parts and animal secretions are the food poisons. And the diseases that you get from food poisoning are obesity and associated problems, diabetes of both type. But when I refer to diabetes, I'm only talking about type 2 diabetes, various forms of atherosclerosis, and we have 60,000 miles of blood vessels that get diseased. So there are many diseases that come as a result of compromising these blood vessels, and the heart, of course, dominates, and behind that it would be strokes. Various kinds of arthritis are due to food poisoning, all the way from nonspecific arthritis to debilitating and deadly arthritis, such as psoriatic and rheumatoid arthritis. Various kinds of cancers. Our patients suffer from food poisoning, and they develop colon, breast, prostate, uterine cancer, as well as many other cancers. And it should be obvious that what you put in your stomach determines whether it's healthy or sick, right? But we didn't find out about this until there was Nexium and Prilosec. And they taught us about the purple pill, and they taught our patients to come and discuss GERD and indigestion with us. Of course, the end result was to sell pills. But it should have been to put good things in the stomach, don't you think? And of course, to end this discussion of various diseases that are due to what we eat, you can talk about chronic constipation and the associated problems. And the way we solve these problems I tell people that they're suffering from food poisoning and that involves animal products and oils. They often go, well, I got nothing else left to eat. That's my whole diet. Well, people need to understand that the diet for human beings, and people have a diet. I mean, there's got to be a diet for people, just like there's a diet for koala bears and snakes and birds. And I mean, every animal has a diet, right? That allows them to feel, function, and live their best. And there should be a diet for people. Well, that diet I'm proposing for you is a starch-based diet. It's based around corn and potatoes and rice. In other words, plant parts that have lots of sugar calories, carbohydrate calories in them. And to that starch-based diet, you add non-starchy green and yellow vegetables like cabbage and kale and lettuce and so on, and some fruits. I tell my patients that when they look at their plate, they don't need to measure it. They don't need to consult a handbook or a dietitian. When they look at their plate, 90% of their food should be starch and about 10% fruits and vegetables. And of course, I left out all animal products, didn't I? And I left out all free oils. Results of my efforts over the last 45 years, we studied 10 years of my practice and published it in the journals. And when we analyzed 1,703 patients over a 10-year period of time at the clinic that I ran in Santa Rosa, California, without excluding anyone, every single person was included in our database. What we found over a 7-day period of time is the people on average lost 3.1 pounds while fully satisfying their appetite, and they loved the food. Spontaneously, they lost 3.1 pounds. The average cholesterol drop was 22 points and no medications were changed. The average decrease in blood pressure in those who had high blood pressure, in other words, 140/90 or greater, was 8/11 millimeters of mercury, and nearly 90% of people got off their medications, particularly their diabetic and high blood pressure medications. That's the 7-day program. And then Oregon Health and Science University, the medical school in Portland, they studied my practice in terms of a research project that we did on diet and multiple sclerosis. And this was a 1-year study. I had nothing to do with this study except to educate the patients. They picked the participants, they determined the tests, they did the follow-up visits, they analyzed the data, they wrote the paper. I had nothing to do with the paper, except that I spent 10 days teaching people how to eat the diet that I believe results in restoration of health and appearance. The average weight loss in 1 year was nearly 20 pounds. These people didn't come to this particular program for weight loss. They came for multiple sclerosis. The average drop in cholesterol was nearly 20 points. We reduced their insulin levels significantly. We got rid of their fatigue in most of the cases. And about 80% of multiple sclerosis patients are plagued by fatigue. It interferes with their family and their work life. But one of the more interesting things was that 85% of the participants were compliant for an entire year. Can you get your patients to take medication for that long? Well, sometimes not. Why were they compliant? Well, the results were so tremendous in terms of improvement in their health, and the food tasted really good. So they stuck with it. Why not? There was an independent study done from New Zealand on our patients. And in fact, I didn't even find out that they used our diet until afterwards, and I read the paper. But this was a community-based study, and what they found over 1 year, taking care of people in a community setting in New Zealand, is the average weight loss was 25 pounds. In fact, these researchers, they brag that they have the best weight loss of any program in the world. Well, if you look at the end of the paper, you'll see they used the Mcdougall Diet. The average drop in cholesterol was about the same as we've gotten in 7 days and a year, about 20 points. And the reduction in the medications was about the same. People also were compliant at about the same level. So we have independent research that shows this works. Why do people get well? Well, it's because the body naturally heals. Thank goodness the body naturally heals, or we look terrible as doctors. Like, for example, when our patients smoke cigarettes, they cough, they wheeze, they get bronchoconstriction. And what happens when they stop this destructive behavior? You don't have to wonder what happens. You've seen it thousands of times. As they stop coughing, they stop wheezing, they get the lung function back. The body is always trying to heal itself. The problem is the damage exceeds the abilities of the body to heal. And so what we do is we need to stop the damage and allow the body to catch up. That's all. It's not that your body's let you down, or your patients have stopped healing. They haven't. All we have to do is stop the destruction and they get well. Because the natural tendency of our patients is to be well, isn't it? They've got to be doing something wrong. Let's talk about diet and climate change for a few minutes. And the implications when we're talking about climate or personal health and so on, I mean, they go beyond the obvious. They go into people's personal appearance, their religious faith, animal suffering, loss of habitat. This really affects every aspect of our lives. I first discovered about climate change, global warming, about the potential loss of our home back in 2006 with Al Gore's documentary. And I'm sure many of you, that was your source of enlightenment, was Al Gore. But in this lecture that he gave and the documentary that he put together, he didn't mention food at all. And that may have been because Al Gore was personally involved in the cattle industry. And based on his personal appearance, I have to believe that he ate the rich Western diet. Even in the sequelae of An Inconvenient Truth that he wrote, that he put together in 2017, they didn't mention diet at all. And they focused on fossil fuels, which is important. We've got to take care of the fossil fuels. But experts tell us today, it's too late. Solving the fossil fuel problems will not save the planet. We have to take another step. And experts agree that step is we have to change the diet of people worldwide. About the same year, we had Livestock's Long Shadow that came out. This is a 400 plus page report that was done by the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. And they determined that agriculture was responsible for 18% of the global warming gases, the greenhouse gases. And they compared that to all transportation. That means airplanes, buses, cars, trains, which is fewer than 14% of the greenhouse gas production. But they left a lot of things out when they did their analysis. And we eventually found out that it was a lot more than that. I wrote my first paper on the connection between diet and climate change back in 2006. With this two separate presentations, Al Gore and Livestock's Long Shadow, I made the connection back in 2006 that we're eating the planet to death. In 2013, I had the opportunity to have Robert Goodland, who was the advisor for the World Bank Environmental Group for 23 years. I had a chance to have him out and give a presentation. He told us, this was 2013, he told us we have 3 years left to make long overdue changes. And his group, when they reanalyzed the Livestock's Long Shadow data, they came to the conclusion, the World Watch Institute, that more than 51% of the global warming gases were caused by agriculture, 51%. The Eat Lancet Commission, which is probably the most respected diet and climate organization in the world, they told us we had 12 years left in 2019. And they made it clear that we needed to change to a diet of plant foods. And that's because the research is absolutely consistent. Our destruction of our planet in terms of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, in other words, global warming gases. When it comes to food, it's dominated by the animal products. Beef, dairy, even fish, and especially farm fish. They account for 80% of the, well, at least 50%, but probably 80%, as much as 80% of the global warming gases that we have. The good thing is there's also been research, and I'm going to show you more of this later in the next part of the presentation. The good thing is there have been researchers who have studied what the impact would be if people change their diet. And the only thing I'm interested in is people changing to a diet that excludes all animal foods. In other words, a vegan diet. And estimates are as high as a 80% reduction in greenhouse gases can be accomplished by an individual overnight by changing from the Western diet to a vegan diet. We'll go through many papers, including the one by the Eat Lancet Commission, which tells us up to an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by any individual, much less a planet of people that change their diet. And it happens overnight. And the reason it can happen is because I believe, and I see it, that the earth acts just like our patients do. The earth is always trying to make adjustments to be viable. It's always making changes. It's always trying to heal itself. The problem is that we have caused a level of destruction that outpaces the ability of the earth to heal. And so, yes, we have to stop this from every source, every possible source. Let's talk about the thing that up until recently has been on everybody's mind. In fact, that's the only thing that the news seemed to talk about, was the infection of the world with various COVID viruses, coronaviruses, starting with COVID-19. And what we find is that diet has a profound effect on the course of this infectious disease. And that was first brought out even before the virus came to the United States and Europe. In China, where the COVID disease began, they had noticed, the Chinese scientists and doctors, that most of the population did well. They were asymptomatic or had mild disease. But there was a certain segment of the Chinese population that went on to hospitalization, requiring mechanical ventilation, and dying. And before the virus even came to the United States, they'd figured out that these were people who were overweight and sick with Western diseases, which they labeled as comorbid diseases. Problems like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, and many others. Anthony Fauci, the most famous spokesman for COVID-19, he actually gave a testimony in June of 2020 to the Congress, where he said that unless you're overweight and have comorbid conditions, you're very unlikely to end up in the hospital or extremely sick. And then the CDC, they came out with their proclamation the next month, and they told us that people with comorbid factors, the problems that we take care of, the problems that we can cure with a simple dietary change. If you have comorbid factors, your risk of hospitalization is 6 times as great. And your risk of dying is 12 times as great as the average population. Even in Europe, they came out with the understanding in the summer of 2020 that one way at least to mitigate this infection and its outcome is to get people to eat better, to get rid of their comorbid diseases. As far as why diet impacts the body, there are probably 1,000 different reasons. One might have to do with the intestinal barrier and the fact that when you eat well, you have a very functional intestinal barrier that's able to keep viruses and other pathogens out of the body. And this gets damaged when you eat an unhealthy diet. The other has to do with a whole bunch of phytochemicals, phytonutrients that are considered to be very important as far as anti-cancer, antiviral, anti-inflammatory properties go. One of the more interesting theories as to why people with comorbid factors end up getting sick, they narrowed down on one of our most important risk factors, and that's cholesterol. And what they discovered is people who have high body loads of cholesterol, in other words, large amounts of cholesterol inside their body, were the ones that ended up having to go to the hospital, ending up on ventilators, and dying. And they even suggested a mechanism which had to do with lipid bridges that are between the bloodstream and, say, the lung tissue. 1 cell thick, and these would be the ACE2 receptors. And what happens is the cholesterol, when you eat a high cholesterol diet, you increase the numbers of these coenzyme CoV2 bridges, lipid bridges, and they also become much larger. So cholesterol, of course, is an easy thing for us to relate to as doctors because we're dealing with it all the time, and understanding that there's a mechanism such as this is probably gives us some better understanding of what's going on. And I think probably what settled this for most of us as physicians is when the idea of cholesterol, which of course is a dietary issue, was put back into the hands of the pharmaceutical industry. And they started talking about how taking statin drugs can reduce the severity of this viral disease. Makes it more real, doesn't it? Well, okay, we've got all kinds of problems here. We've got problems with chronic diseases, problems with our climate, and problems with infectious diseases. And the solution is to change our diet. The question you have now is, will people change their diet? You know, we've discovered the truth. Is it relevant? Will people change their diet? Well, let me give you an example of how people in large populations can and will change their diet if it's needed. This happened during World War I. During World War I, the country of England set up a blockade to starve the Germans. And you can see here in the picture of the North Sea, you can see there's the country of Denmark. So this blockade severely affected the food supply of the people in Denmark. And that was between 1914 and 1918, World War I. Mcdougall Diet, he was a very famous scientist back in the 1800s, early 1900s, and also friends with the Danish government. And he convinced them that instead of starving as a result of the blockade, which, by the way, 400,000 Germans during this period of time, they did starve to death because they believed in a well-balanced diet. Well, Diet said, we're not going to eat a well-balanced diet in Denmark anymore. What we're going to do is stop eating the animals. You know, if you were a pig farmer, maybe you had a pig once a month to eat. If you were the richest person in Copenhagen, maybe you had a piece of beef during World War I. But otherwise, the people of Denmark, 3 million people, eat a diet that the animals used to eat. A diet of soybeans and grains and root vegetables and so on. The results of Diet's work were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 1920. And what they found was that during this period of time, World War I, during this period of time, Denmark suffered the lowest incidence of disease it had ever suffered in the past and since then. There was a 34% reduction in diseases and death from diseases in Denmark during this period of time. Period of tremendous stress, by the way. Chronic diseases as well as infectious diseases decreased. Well, I want to talk to you about what happened during World War I in Denmark when it came to another infection, which we've used often to compare with the COVID infection, and that's the Spanish flu. During that period of time, World War I, we had the Spanish flu affecting Europe, and people practiced standard public health measures, masks, social distancing. They got interested in vaccines, but unfortunately, the Spanish flu killed between 20 and 50 million people worldwide. But the chances of dying, the chances of getting sick varied depending upon what country you were in. And let's take a look here. If you look at the German countries, or excuse me, the European countries, including Germany, which was the one where they had the highest infection rate of Spanish flu during World War I, and you compare that to the Danish, which had the lowest incidence of infection with Spanish flu during World War I, you can see the same story coming out that's coming out with COVID. If you're healthier, and they were eating a starch-based diet during World War I, they avoided starvation. They were never hungry. They reduced the risk of heart disease, diabetes, et cetera. They also reduced their chance dramatically of catching and dying of a viral infection that was dominating the world at that time. So people will change. 3 million people from Denmark did. Danes did. I look at this this COVID instance that's happened over 2+ years as a wake-up call. It's a chance for us to realize that we can change. I mean, we've gone through a decade of change in a year. People have the ability to change, and we can undergo all kinds of variations in our living situation. And we're starting to realize that this is a probability of ending our chances of living on Earth for our children and grandchildren, even ourselves. So, you know, COVID-19 could be the comet that people notice. You've seen the movie Don't Look Up, right? All right, well, it did make a difference. There are multiple observations that COVID-19 has improved the environment. For example, in China, the growing season came 8.5 days earlier. In other words, there were more plants were able to grow in China, and they had an increased coverage, green coverage of the forestry in China during the first year of COVID-19. So we have a connection here of diet, infectious disease, and chronic disease, and that common denominator is what we eat. All right, what I'd like to do is like to stop and ask if anybody has any questions now, because I want to go on to something else with you.
Sure. Thank you for that, Dr. McDougall. Talia, do you have any questions for Dr. McDougall?
Yes, I do have a few questions for Dr. McDougall. Thank you so much for that talk. So one of our participants says that they have a pediatrician that they know that still tells parents that their children need to have milk every day and that soy milk or other plant milks are not good for their children. This makes the parents very fearful of omitting milk. What would you say to these parents to assure them that their children will be fine without cow's milk?
Well, I'd probably come out with some smart aleck comment like, are you raising baby cows? Calves? Do you have calves? You know, some of these things like no animal drinks the milk of another species. No animal drinks milk after the weaning period. Now, you've heard these many times before, but they're pretty profound statements. I would explain to the parents that cow's milk is not only unnecessary, and to begin with, there's never been a case of dietary calcium deficiency ever reported, ever. There's no such thing from any natural diet. It's never occurred. The only case of calcium deficiency that I've ever heard about occurred with synthetic diets that were fed to young children. And they're individual cases. You have no friends with calcium deficiency? It plain and simple doesn't exist. I know some of you are thinking of osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is not a disease of calcium deficiency, and I really don't want to spend the time going into the fact that osteoporosis is due to the acid that people consume when they eat the high protein Western diet.
It also kind of addresses another question that we had come through the chat, which talks about explaining osteopenia and what kind of is needed in the diet to treat osteopenia. Is there anything more you would like to add to answer that question, Dr. McDougall?
I could give you a whole lecture on osteoporosis and diet. Worldwide, first of all, you have to start out with the incidence of osteoporosis, hip fractures, which is where the graphs come from, is highest in Western countries like the United States, Norway, Sweden, and that osteoporosis is rare to non-existent in places where people eat a starch-based diet, like in rural Africa. Before 1980, or in the years of the 80s, you know, I looked for a single case of osteoporosis to occur in a rural African woman and to be published in the British journals. And they clearly came out in the articles that they wrote that they couldn't find any hip fractures in African women, rural African women. This was before 1980. And of course, they ate a starch-based diet primarily of corn and root vegetables, et cetera. So anyways, I would start to explain the geographic data. Then I would go to the basic research that shows that if you eat a high protein diet, the American diet is a high protein diet. You know that. You're eating a diet that it has a lot of amino acids. You know that. Protein, you remember proteins were made of amino acids. And if you look at the kind of amino acids that are present in animal foods compared to vegetable foods, animal foods are high in sulfur-containing amino acids. Methionine and cysteine are sulfur-containing amino acids, and they break down into sulfuric acid. So you dump this huge acid load, which causes not only the loss of calcium, but the loss of bone material into the urinary tract. You kind of pee your bones out in the toilet. Anyway, I could go on for hours, but I really don't want to spend your time going through this discussion. But I'll be glad if you invite me back to give you a whole talk on osteoporosis.
Dr. McDougall, there's another question in the Q&A that, where to go, in the chat, that I would like to run by you. It says, there are now medical organizations making connections and discussing the connections between climate, human health, and social disparities in health. This still is not touching on the power of diet in all of these areas. What do you feel is the block, and how can we move the needle on this critical issue?
Could you summarize the question for me, Ted?
The question is, how can we get the medical organizations to start moving in this direction, in the direction that you're advocating?
I have to tell you, I began this presentation by explaining that I was giving the fourth lifetime achievement award by the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, the fourth award given. And you were there at that presentation. I think I remember, Ted.
I know, it was great.
And, yep. There were 500 people in the audience, and there were another 1,000 outside the doors, and heard about the presentation. And I got 2 standing ovations during this presentation. And I said to these folks, I said, look, you're experts on diet. You're the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. If you don't do it, who will? And when it comes to the time where you're called upon to do something for the climate, for your children and grandchildren, what are you going to do? Are you going to build Teslas? Are you going to install solar panels on people's roofs? You are an expert in food. You need to come out and make a difference. Ted, that was 2.5 years ago, and I've been talking to Susan Benicus and David Katz and a whole bunch of other people, and trying to get people to move in the right direction. It just is going no place. I don't know, but doctors are the logical people, particularly the American College of Lifestyle Medicine doctors, to lead this. We ought to be going to organizations like the Sierra Club and other conservation organizations and telling them or explaining to them, look, you're worried about the environment, you won't talk about the food. And I don't know. I'm open for your ideas. It's been that's why I put together the next presentation. Is I'm trying to get my hand waving up high enough so somebody will notice. Because so far they haven't been noticing, Ted. But they really didn't notice about my 45 years of taking care of chronic disease either. So I'm kind of used to it.
Well, I think they're going to start to pay attention sooner rather than later. I certainly hope so. Actually, we did get a comment from somebody who works at ACLM saying this year ACLM is coming out with our white paper, a position on planetary health. So, ACLM is, I think, starting to move, and there is a global sustainability committee to make sure that this happens as well.
I hope so, Ted. I really will. I love working with ACLM, and I do anything I could to help them. But unfortunately, organizations move slowly. At the end of the presentation, one of the doctors who was taking the certifying exam for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, he walked up to me and he said, "Why should I be taking the American College of Lifestyle Medicine certification exam? Why should I be learning how to be a doctor that practices lifestyle medicine?" He said to me, he says, "How do I practice on a dead planet?" Okay. There should be nothing else on anybody's table right now, particularly those people like us who know better. Those who know have the obligation to act, and we're not doing it. And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just trying to make a statement as to where things are, and I want to change it. And anybody who has some ideas on how to wake people up, how to get them to open their eyes, I'd be
Mhm.
open for it. And that's why I put together the next presentation and the next project that I'm going to share with you.
All right, well, let's thank you for that. Let's see your next presentation, please.
All right, let's see if I can get this going.
Thank you, Tylea. We'll call you back in a minute. Or,
Yeah,
at the end of the-
right. All
Yeah.
right, let's see what we got here. Boy, oh boy, I don't.
Yeah, that's all right. So
Let me just let me work on it here a minute.
it's always something with a computer.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll do it. We're in good shape.
Okay. All right, great.
Okay. All right. So if you'll be a little patient with me, this is the first time I've given this presentation, but it's an honor to give it to such a group. And I certainly enjoy any comments or positive suggestions. Anyway, I spent a half a century. I personally touched 12,000 patients and helped them get well. But now my interest, and it's not like I don't practice, I'm still very involved in our 12-day telemedicine, telemarketing program that's extremely enjoyable to work at and very well received. But my true love has changed, and I'll explain to you about it and how it's changed, and how instead of having 7 billion people as potential patients, I've got one patient that I'm focused on, and that's the planet. And the subtitle of this presentation is Diet Therapy. Diet therapy, which is what we should be practicing, is diet. I know nobody's heard about diet therapy, but that's what we should be practicing, using tools to cure our patients. That's dietary therapy that involve changing the diet, both short-term and long-term. We need to do that with my new patient, Earth. The presentation, and you can see it, it's at mcdougallfoundation.org. And it begins with rather a dismal situation, and we are in big trouble. If you don't realize it, I think when I get done with today's talk, you ought to go out and spend a little time on the internet and find out what the reality of the situation is. But this whole site that I put together is about optimism, because there are so many people out there that are willing to tell you that we're in trouble and that it's too late. And I see no reason to talk like this, even if it's true. I'm not going to stop fighting. And I know you don't want to either. And you want to hear from people that are saying positive things about what we can do, not what we can't do. And what we can do is we can change the diet of individuals and maybe of everybody on the planet, or enough people to make a difference.
Hello, my name is Jamie. I'm a working mom, I'm a wife, and the McDougalls have helped my family and me achieve amazing health. But now I'm looking to them to answer a question and one of our greatest concerns about the current environmental crisis. What can one individual do besides driving an electric or hybrid car and recycling? What can one person do to help mitigate and help slow down the warming of our planet?
Hello, I'm Dr. John Mcdougall. I've been practicing medicine for more than half a century, and I have personally helped more than 12,000 patients cure their illnesses with a change to traditional diets. The diets followed by 99% of people who walk this earth. With the birth of my first grandchild in 2004, my focus has changed to helping save the planet. Diet is the most powerful and the most neglected tool we have for mitigating climate change. More than half of all greenhouse gases come from animal agriculture. According to experts, you can personally cut your contribution of greenhouse gases by as much as 80% overnight by eliminating animal foods from your diet. A side benefit is better health without additional costs or adverse effects. There's no reason to hesitate. We have a world to save.
Hi, I'm Mary Mcdougal. Since 1977, I've been feeding my family a traditional meal plan based on foods you already enjoy, including beans, breads, rice, pasta, and potatoes. I have also published thousands of recipes, and I'm sure you will find many new favorites. This change in your personal diet to save the planet is not about suffering, but about finding new foods to love.
Okay. So there's a bit of an introduction on the website that tells you about Mary and I and how we spent our last half a century trying to make a positive difference in people's lives. And our efforts have been to not prove that changing diet will cure disease, but to figuring out how to get people to change their diet. The first booklet we ever put together was in 1979. It was called, well, it wasn't called Heal and Stay Healthy. It wasn't called Cure Heart Disease and Cancer. It was called Making the Change. Because that's the problem. You know this as doctors. The problem is to get people to change. And that's what I've been working on. And that's what this website is all about. And, you know, the one thing I have that none of the other experts in diet seem to have, at least my mentors didn't in the past, is they didn't have a companion in life like Mary, who was able to put together the food in a practical way that made it enjoyable, made it tasty, made it accessible, made it simple, made it homey. You know, Mary's done that. I put together a climate change mastermind that's available to people. I took 12 of the best experts that I could gather together from around the world who had a message on diet, climate change. And I put them together in 12 presentations with 4 additional commentaries. And I think you'll find these people very interesting. Then I put together a one-day seminar on the potato, because the potato is the starch that is most likely and most capable of allowing us to get through this climate change. It is the most productive of all the starches available to us. And then I did a whole presentation, a whole day-long presentation on protein. Of all the nutrients, protein is the nutrient that has done more to harm your patients and mine and the planet Earth than any other misconception that there is. There's never been a case of protein deficiency, and yet that seems to be what everybody's concerned about, is where do I get my protein? These are the speakers that are put together in that 16 episode, 12 presenter discussion that was available on the website. And then the thing that I dealt with next on the website was what keeps people from making changes. And I call these the deadly dietary deceptions. And there are 4 of them. There's the dietary deception of protein. You know, if I mention protein, what do your patients echo? What do they say? They say meat, don't they? Or eggs, and sometimes dairy, but meat. And yet, like I say, there's never been a case of protein deficiency ever described in the world literature. There's no such thing. And yet, you know, it's the seeking of protein that causes the greatest production of carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide. I mentioned calcium. You respond, what? If I say calcium, what do your patients say? They say milk. And yet, as we discussed, there's never been a case of dietary calcium deficiency on any natural diet ever. And if I mention omega-3s, what do your patients say? What do they tell you? What do they come back with? Fish. You got to eat fish. Well, no fish has ever made an omega-3 fat. Only plants can desaturate at the carbon-3 position. The only reason that the fish have omega-3 fats is because they ate seaweed or algae. And the 4th myth is the idea that starches are bad for you. Starches are malign. Starches are fattening. Yet, 99.99% of the people who ever walked this earth lived on starch-based diets. And starch is the key not only to saving the planet, but to saving our patients' personal health. And by the way, withstanding the next COVID variant. We have a foundation. You may wonder how this website is being supported. It's completely nonprofit. Nothing sold here, no gimmicks. It's supported by our 501c3 foundation. And part of this website, and the reason people will want to come back to it, is because of interviews that I'll be doing with various well-known people. Here are a couple of interviews that are up there right now of people that you know about, Dan Buettner and Dr. Dean Ornish. They gave presentations on what you could do about the climate in terms of diet. And if you know of people who would be worthy presenters, please let me know. I'm going to dominate this website with optimistic points of view, most of them dealing with diet. And I'm tired of the naysayers. You know, I realize it's big. We've got big problems. I don't need to hear about it again unless you have a solution. Then I want to hear about it. We have provided a 67-page document that's a free program on how to do the Mcdougall Diet. And there are no gimmicks. Again, it's completely free. It explains to you that, you know, I spent 44 years using this approach to help people get over high blood pressure, diabetes, multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, constipation, et cetera. Now the focus of attention, the same diet, is on the planet. And the foods that are served on this particular diet, as we've discussed just a minute ago, are a starch-based diet with fruits and vegetables. And there are over 4,000 recipes that we offer people for free that are on our website, that are in a mobile cookbook app and also in 11 of the 13 national best-selling books that we have. Free. This is part of the foundation and the way people donate. They can donate with credit cards and PayPal, many means, hopefully cryptocurrency too. All right, let's talk about diet therapy for the planet. When you first get into this page, you're going to be struck by a rolling set of numbers. And the one that was going to pop out to you is the one that says that we can cause an 87% at least reduction in global warming gases by changing our diet. I mean, that ought to stimulate you to go out and find where I'd find such a statement, where I'd put such a value on my website, that we have the potential at least of reducing global warming gases by 87%. You know, the Food and Agriculture Organization with livestock long saddle, they told us that there was an 18% of the greenhouse gases were due to agriculture. They said that. And then the World Watch Institute, they came out and said, no, it's 51% if we take the same data, we recalculate it. But we can go higher than that. Yes, we can. And the evidence for it is here. I provided it for you on the website. You can look up the papers. I encourage you. I challenge you to read them. You need this tool. I mean, you need this tool at least for your own salvation. Don't you need something optimistic to think about? I do. I need to think that there's something I can do. Anyway, 87%, but you don't have to go there. You can go to Public Library of Science. They will tell you about an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by switching to a vegan diet overnight. Or you can go to this publication in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, a 78% reduction in greenhouse gases with a similar change. Or you can go to the Lancet Plant Health Journal, and there's an 84% reduction in greenhouse gases. Eat Lancet's commission has a lot to do with this. This particular paper showing an 80% reduction in greenhouse gases. You're going to read these, aren't you? Yeah. Or here's another one. Here's an environmental research letter. 80% reduction of greenhouse gases by switching to a vegan diet. What do you think? So are you inspired? Another one from Global Food Science Society. Only a 57% reduction in greenhouse gases with this paper, but we still need to try, don't we? In other words, the scientific literature is clear and dominated by a very positive point of view that we can change our future. But we're not doing it, and we're in big trouble. And the foods that we eat dramatically change our future and the chances for our kids and grandkids. There have been efforts like the Food and Agriculture Organization report, the Livestock's Long Shadow and World Watch Institute, and the Eat Lancet Commission, and Bill Gates. There have been efforts of people to tell us that we need to make change, but even though some of them have talked about diet and the effect of agriculture, nobody has come out and told the public, the individual, or the country, or the community, what to do and how to do it and what to eat. They just haven't taken that extra step. And that's what this website accomplishes. It tells people in a very practical, simple way of what they have to do to make personal changes that will save the world. These are the people that have addressed, and I've talked to you about them. Bill Gates, for example, he does presentations like on 60 Minutes and CNN News. He does them from his favorite burger joint in Seattle, Washington. Come on now, Bill Gates comes out and says there's nothing off the table. There's everything we got to consider to save the planet. And then he eats a cheeseburger during the interview. Can you imagine if I could get his attention? Such a powerful, wealthy man, and if I could get him to understand the implications, if he really means that nothing's off the table, we ought to consider everything and anything. Wow, wouldn't that be great? Anyway, to make my message a lot more palatable, I've suggested to people that they change to a traditional diet, not to a vegan diet. A vegan diet, that's offensive. Not to the Mcdougall diet, that would offend people, but to change to a vegan diet, or excuse me, a traditional diet, a diet like, for example, the people in Central America, like the Asians, eat a rice-based diet. People in the Middle East, the Middle East used to be called the breadbasket of the world. In South America, they still today live predominantly on a potato-based diet. And we have the first controlled trial 2,600 years ago that showed people could be cured on a traditional diet, a starch-based diet. They called it a diet of pulses and water. Anyway, the starch eating has been our tradition. If you go to the next section of the website, you find news and insights, where we put all kinds of important information. One of the important things I want you to realize is the earth has not given up. It's just like your patients. They're still trying to heal. We just need to put the earth on a path of healing. There are 3 documentaries that I recommend. I strongly encourage you to watch these 3, and probably only these 3. This will give you the basic understanding of what you need to be up to speed as far as diet and climate is concerned. Thank you. I know you're getting ready to cut me off, Ted, so thank you.
I'm not really, no, that was fantastic. And I'm not, I don't want to cut you off. I just want to have some time for more questions, but that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And yeah, we really appreciate it. I just encourage everyone to go take a look at that, your website, the Mcdougall Foundation.
Yeah, it's McDougallFoundation.org.
Right. Yeah.
It's remember .org, not .com, and
sure.
Should come up pretty quickly for you. It's getting a lot of attention. We've even gotten our first donations.
Oh, that's great. Tylea, what have you got there?
Okay, so we have quite a bit of questions from our attendees.
I'm just going to remind Dr. McDougall, this is Dr. McDougall, most of the people in this in the audience are general public. It's not mostly physicians, it's mostly general public.
Oh, good. Well, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry I gave the general public a demotion.
Exactly. Okay, Tylea, back to you.
Okay. So one of our attendees asked, how do you suggest we counteract the media blitz from big agricultural businesses, especially when there's so much research that is funded by them?
You know, you're
so much food research.
You're asking me questions way beyond my skills. I don't know how we do this. I really don't know. I don't know what's going to create the crack that allows the light to shine through. I don't know what it is.
Mhm. If I could take a crack at that, if you don't mind, Dr. McDougall, one of the things that you've had experience with over the years is how quickly people get better. And we've in some ways emulated your program with our 15-day whole food plant-based jumpstart. And we tell people, look, there's so much disinformation out there. How do you know who to believe? Maybe we're not telling you the truth, but you try this for 2 weeks and see what happens to your own body. And then tell other people and tell your friends and relatives, because it's working for you. That's the way to do the test. Do the scientific method on your own body. And that's my approach to getting the word out and maybe changing people's minds. So
that might work out, and I certainly think we need to try everything, Ted. But
sure.
I'm from the Vietnamese conflict, and
Right.
Back then we used to march in the street and burn our draft card. If this isn't as important as the Vietnamese conflict, I don't know what it will ever be.
Sure.
We need to be in the streets, is what we need to do. We need to be having massive worldwide protests.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't. If we are able to act, we have to do it soon and we have to do it dramatically. But what's going to cause that spark to happen? I don't know. And that's why I've invested the last 3 years into developing this website. It's been a project from me for a long time. I'm not done. We have a lot of improvements to make on it, and your suggestions would be greatly appreciated.
Sure. All right, I think we have time for one more question. And it's actually somebody just put the wrong link in there. It's the McDougallFoundation.org, right? Not
It's
.com.
McDougall, yeah, it's McDougall Foundation, FOUNDATION.org.
.org. Okay. Somebody
No
to fix
period.
that.
It's just McDougallFoundation.org.
Totally. We'll have time for one more question. What have you got there?
Okay, so one of our attendees, I'm going to try to condense this question. It's a little long, but they watched a short video about vertical regenerative ocean farming. In that video, Dr. Ayanna Johnson talked about how it's so efficient to grow oysters, mussels, and clams that it actually has a lower carbon footprint than being vegan as a source of protein. They're wondering if you're familiar with this mode of farming and what is your take on it? And also if you think that it can also be sustainable as solely a kelp farm. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm not familiar with it, and I just can't understand why that would be true. I can't understand why anything could be more efficient than a potato.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the acreage required, as far as the variability, as far as where potatoes can grow, they can grow on mountaintops, they can grow next to seasides, they can grow in cold, they can grow in hot, they can grow in wet, they can grow in dry environments. I can't imagine a lowly oyster competing with a potato, but whatever. I learn something every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. So, Dr. McDougall, do you have any final words of wisdom before we?
I just hope that I inspired you to make this part of your passion. As that young doctor explained to me when I finished the presentation 2 years ago for the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, you can't do anything on a dead planet. You name it, you can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
So all efforts should be expended, no holds barred. The ship is sinking. All hands on deck, please, right now. We need you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. So in answer to the question, diet and climate change, should doctors care? I think your answer is an emphatic yes.
Everybody, everybody's on the ship, Ted.
Yeah.
And the problem is just like you all said, your frustration level is nobody seems to be listening, but isn't that the way it is with so many things in life, that this is going to become so crucial that people are going to have to listen, and they're going to look for answers, and maybe they're going to look for the answer that we're trying to bring soon enough to make a difference. I sure hope so.
Yeah.
If you
I think we all
just
hope.
don't listen to those naysayers, the ones who said we're doomed, which is basically everybody. Listen to me. I'm telling you, we're going to win this battle. Yeah. Although, ask me what I really believe. We got a tough road ahead of us, Ted.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's got to be as you say, it's an all hands on deck situation. It's not, we can't ignore this anymore. And the thing is, we can be optimistic and positive because we have a very powerful solution in our hands. And we just got to get it out there.
The most powerful there is. I mean, far
Right.
more powerful than taking care of the global warming gases. And
Mhm.
you'll learn when you read these papers, you'll learn that it's necessary that we fix the food before we stop the fossil fuels. Because what happens is when you stop fossil fuels, you take the particulate matter out of the atmosphere in about 5 days. The particulate matter reflects sunlight.
Mhm.
We will have a dramatic heating of the planet if we stopped immediately the production of fossil fuels. It would be suicide. But see, people don't understand that. We've got to fix the food now.
Mhm.
Can we do it? Why not?
Why not? Exactly. All right. And with that, I would, Dr. Friedman, could you reappear if you're still there? And my colleague, and there she is, Dr. Friedman, Ilea, Dr. McDougall. Thank you all very much. And
Thank
thank
you.
you all to the audience.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Good night.
Wonderful.
Good night,
job.
everybody.
Bye-bye.